But this is essentially a global overview of cement-based boards, including a little bit of a look at the markets and also looking at the companies that are largely involved with the industry around the world. Now, this is based on a fairly long piece of work that we did towards the end of last year, which was compiling a database of cement-based boards manufacturers around the world. And hopefully many of you actually received the initial database that we sent out. We'd found over 200 different companies, or 200 different factories, I should say, around the world producing cement-based boards. And we sent that out as a beta, if you like, and we had from 20 different contributors around the world found another 50 different cement-based board factories that we previously were unaware of. Now, I've said here that that database is on your CD. It's not on the CD, that was my error, but what we will do is by the end of this week we will send you a copy of that Excel spreadsheet of 250 cement-based board factories around the world. So hopefully you will find that of some use. It was compiled through 2015, international contributors from 20 different countries. Having said that, we were very thorough, I hope, but it's absolutely incomplete. So I'm sure that if you were to look at that list carefully, you would be able to say, well, you've forgotten such and such a factory in outer Baluchistan. That's definitely possible. I think we've got most of them. Having said that, China is very likely to be underrepresented in our database. It's very difficult to track down the factories over there. Typically, they're owned by either one or other of BNBM, Beijing New Building Materials, or China New Building Materials. And they typically are not very upfront about which factories they own, or especially about the capacities of those factories. And quite often those the information is actually in Chinese, so it can be very, very difficult to track those down. And of course, we're very, very open to amendments of that database. Whenever you receive it, please, if you have noticed that there's a factory not present or wrongly labelled, please do let us know and we'll try and improve that. But hopefully you'll find that that's databases of use. Here's the world. Now what we've had to do is we've had to rank the companies in terms of the total number of factories that we've been able to identify for them. They typically do not give any information at all about their production capacity, and if they do, they're typically in different units. Sometimes they give them in weights, sometimes they give them in areas, and of course different areas tally to different weights depending on the thickness of the board used. So this is a little bit of a rough comparison of the different sizes of the different companies. It's done in the terms of the number of factories that we've been able to identify. But the first one of them, the largest that we can find, of course, is Etex, largely based in Europe, but actually factories around the world. Second would be Elementia, 14 different factories, largely based in Mexico. It's a Mexican company, and they are in Mexico, Central America, and South America, or Northern South America. James Hardy, third largest number of factories around the world, 13. Not an Australian company, you might be surprised to find. It's actually an Irish company now. They relocated to Ireland. They got a better rate of corporation tax over there. So I can't blame them for that. Obviously, it's originally an Australian company with very strong manufacturing capacity in Australia and Southeast Asia, as well as in the US. Now it's not. Now it's an Irish company. Nichiha Corporation of Japan, fourth largest in the world. 11 manufacturing sites, pretty much all in Japan. but they do have some manufacturing in the States. Ramco Industries of India, 10 fiberboard factories in India, followed by Everest Industries Limited, 8 factories in India. So quite a concentration in India. These are companies that will have grown out of manufacturing asbestos cement boards. Chrysotile asbestos proven to be cancer-causing. Thankfully now they have phased out the use of asbestos, although actually that's partly debatable, but let's debate that over a beer at some point. Next largest, Saint-Gobain, ancient company, 350 years old, originally established to make the mirrors and windows in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles, and now is one of the largest building materials companies in the world, if not the largest. It has factories around the world, but 5 of them are in Brazil, so very much concentrated on South America. Durasol, an interesting company, and I'll come on to this a little bit later on. Because this industry has had such a long history, it's had a number of different business models, one of which is shared to a certain extent by Durasol and Etinet. They came up with the original technology, then they licensed it out, so that those licenses went off to a number of different companies around the world, and after the licenses expired, they then held on to those processes. So you find these companies with the same name, with the same stem, if you like, the same history. They're scattered around the world, and they can now be different companies. And I'll mention this with regards to Etinet as well. Sorry, I should have said that Saint-Gobain manufactures its cement boards through Gyprock. Fibercem Holding, a major manufacturer of fiber cement boards, Swiss. Quite difficult to track down which is actually the ultimate owner of this company, but if you're reasonably diligent, you'll find that Fibercem Holding, via another holding company, is finally owned by Swisspor Group, and they're manufacturing boards more and more with the trade name of Swiss Pearl. But that again is a slightly complicated situation. USG has 5 manufacturing facilities in the US. That's United States Gypsum. National Gypsum Company either has 4 manufacturing facilities, or 5 if you include the Permabond facility in Mexico, whether or not it's an independent or not. I don't have the information to be able to tell you, but again, that's maybe one for the bar later on. Oran Vanech Roof Tiles, holding company for Oranit cement boards from Thailand, and we'll see a little bit more of that later on in the conference, or actually at the very, very end of the conference. And then finally, Sembrit. Again, in Europe, a lot of these companies have very strong links to Europe. They have 4 cement-based boards companies, manufacturing facilities, factories. At the moment, we have 254 different cement-based board factories on our database, but it's interesting that the top 10 companies, down to Durasol, I think it was down to Durasol, they actually have 122 of the factories that we've identified, so 48% of those factories. So it's fairly well concentrated with the largest companies, but there's certainly more room for concatenation, if you like, companies joining together in the future, and I'll come on to that in a sec as well. I just want to go back to this slightly different business models, the Durasol and Etinet business models that we've seen. So I mentioned the Hatchek process for cement board production. It was originally invented by an Austrian gentleman, Ludwig Hatschek. He created his original factory in 1894 called the Eternit Work, Ludwig Hatschek in Austria. The boards that he produced were called Eternit, which is a fantastic trade name, if you like, very memorable, based on eternal, so they're never going to degrade. Licenses were sold throughout Europe and beyond, and as I said, many of those Eternit fibre cement factories became independent companies, but a lot of them were then acquired by the Belgian Etex Group, which I mentioned has got 41 factories that we've identified. It was previously known as the Eternit Group, and now it's renamed itself as Etex. So you'll find in our database maybe about half of those companies that are owned by Etex are called Eternit something, Eternit Brazil or Eternit Poland, something like that. But you'll also find Eternit companies owned by other companies. So Dansk Eternit had one of those licenses, and it was previously known as Dansk Eternit, slightly confusingly, but it had a particular board brand called Sembrit. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And possibly to separate it from confusion with the other trade names, it decided to take on board the Sembrit brand as the name for the whole company. So they're actually Eternit companies are owned by Etex Elementia, which is a Mexican company, and Fibersem Holding. They now own the original Ludwig Hatschek company, but Fibersem Holding is ultimately owned by the Swiss. So you've really got a slightly complicated situation there. I just want to tell you a little bit more about Dansk Eternit Fabrics, now known as Sembrit. They started off in 2010 when the Russian Tsar placed an order for 3 fibre cement plants with the Danish company FL Schmidt. Unfortunately, just as the factories were due to be delivered, along came the Russian Revolution. 2 of the factories went to Russia, one of them stayed behind, and actually it spent 13 years in storage until 1927. FL Schmidt and Company then used it to establish its own company, Dansk Eternit Fabrik, now known as Sembrit, in Aalborg in the northern part of Denmark. But eventually, when FL Schmidt was forced to get rid of some of its non-core companies, it sold Sembrit to Solix Group. That's as recently as 2015. And just to put you in the picture, Sembrit derives from the Cimbri, which is a nomadic tribe from northern Denmark that conquered large parts of Europe and then threatened the Roman Empire around 100 years BC. And it was first used in 1941 as the name of an export brand, specifically in Dansk Eternit Fabrics' European conquest. So that's how the really quite complicated mosaic of different company names and trade names has come into being. I hope that's perfectly clear for you. Now, we just did a basic analysis of the rundown of the largest cement-based boards manufacturers, again based on number of factories. This absolutely does not take into account the size of the factories. We know, for example, in the wallboard industry, American, for example, and perhaps German factories would tend to be 2, 3, 4, or 5 times as large as some other countries. They're just using them for very large economies of scale. They have the population densities to allow those factories to be large and still economic with the transport distances involved. So this is, again, a very, very basic count of the number of factories in each company. So the largest is the USA, 26, and actually the font size is 26-point font size. So you can get a little bit of an idea of the relative sizes. Next China and India, 22 each that we've identified. I suspect that China is actually larger than that. Next is Russia, 15 factories. Next, Japan with 13 factories. Next, 3 countries, all with 9 factories each: Germany, Turkey, and Brazil. Next, Thailand, getting pretty small there. There's Italy, Switzerland, and Canada with 6 each, and Mexico with 5. And here we have, if you like, a full rundown from, I think it's the first 20 different countries. Also on that list would be Australia, Austria, Colombia, Nigeria, Pakistan, Belgium, Chile, Denmark, Indonesia, Malaysia, and then the Netherlands. And the top 10 countries in the world, as far as we can tell, have 140 out of 254 of the factories that we've identified. That's 55%. Now, I just want to say a few words about the top 3 companies and where they have their manufacturing facilities. This is Etex, and it's got a very, very wide variety of brand names associated with all of its different construction materials, not all of which are cement-based boards, but the ones that are related to cement-based boards include Creaton, EBM, Essenet, Europanels, Iverson, Marley, Nigerite, Promat, Cineat, and Tegral. And some of those companies also produce other types of materials, but they also certainly produce cement-based boards under those brands as well. You can see that it's a very widespread, well geographically diversified company with fairly strong manufacturing presence in Southeast Asia, but particularly strong in Europe. Elementia, the second largest company that we could find in terms of the number of factories. It is a Mexican company, Mexican-owned company. It has strong manufacturing in America for some historical reasons. Also in Mexico, obviously, Central America and Northern South America. And James Hardie, I think one of the most interesting companies out there, previously Australian, relocated to Ireland, headquartered in Ireland, but very strong manufacturing in America. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides that I've found from their website, and what they don't put on their website, I don't know. You can find their prices, you can find market shares, you can find everything that you want on their website. And it's really worthwhile half an hour of wandering around and seeing what you can find in there. The investor presentations are particularly interesting. But I was debating whether or not to show you their selling prices, which are absolutely on their website. Very deep within one of their investor presentations, but I thought that actually at the end of the day it was not appropriate. But you can go and find those out for yourself. So this is just a very brief look at how many employees they have. So just over 2,250. Large concentration in Asia Pacific. They have a lot of their sales, 77% in the US and in Europe. Actually more profit, or EBIT, comes from Asia Pacific. They have, and I think this is a very interesting company because actually they have technical expertise, deep technical expertise in manufacturing cement-based boards, but they produce a really wide variety of applications for these boards using the same kind of technology. So there's a little bit of overlap here. On the left-hand side, the left-hand-most 3 boxes, you've got materials that they're producing for US and Europe, and in the right-hand 4 boxes, they are brands that are in the, products that they're producing in Asia Pacific, and actually they don't make interior walls, ceilings, flooring and commercial exteriors necessarily in US and Europe, but there's some overlap there. But they have a wide variety of niches that they're putting their product into, but they also have a portfolio of brands. So there's a little bit of confusion in here as to, it's not just James Hardie. It might be a brand, Prevail, or Artisan, by James Hardie. So they're not always calling their product specifically by a James Hardie name, if you like. And as I mentioned, this is from deep within one of their investor presentations. This is the breakdown in North American external cladding. So what you would put on the outside of your house. And that's a lot of houses that they're building there. I think it was down to about 500,000 houses a couple of years ago, and it's coming back up to its historic average, which I think is about 1.5 million. So there's a lot of houses that need this material as they're being built. And some of these cladding materials don't last forever, and so you may have to eventually reclad the outside of your house, and this is obviously a market that all of these companies are looking for as well. But fibre cement is nearly 20% of the total market share for external cladding in the US. Vinyl is the largest portion, and then wood, more or less equivalent to fibre cement, and then stucco, brick, stone, and other. So fibre cement is a big old market. There is a suggestion that the US fibre cement product market is worth around about $2 billion per year. It's estimated at around 10% of the global market. It could well be larger than that. So the market is likely to be worth in the region of $20 billion a year, which is absolutely not to be sniffed at. Absolutely big industry with a lot of money going into it, and some very profitable companies operating in it as well. So I'm just about to come to the end of my presentations, but I'd just like to say that any product is only just about as good as the workers that are installing it. And the good news, of course, with board-based products is that the factory has already created the surface finish for you in many ways. But there are lots of things that can go wrong on the building site. You can get dents, or you can have things bashed off, or you didn't snap it cleanly enough, or all sorts of different things. And of course, as with many companies, you love your workers, you love your employees, but actually they cost you a lot of money, and if you could possibly do without them, you probably would. And so I just want to give you a very, very brief glimpse of what the board panel industry is going to look like at the cold face, the working end. It's going to all be installed by robots. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.